It is September 18th, 2025. I'm reading from my book, Uriel's Word, A Lightworker's Journey. This is Episode 10. From my foreword. This is a poem by Hafiz, quoted from page 148 of A Year with Hafiz by Daniel Ladinsky. Enduring the absurd. Such a dignity can come to us, enduring the absurd with forbearance and humor. Elegant becomes the countenance of one who exemplifies patience. This nonfiction book is dedicated to all the valiant starseeds, lightworkers, healers, shamans, spiritual warriors, mystics, peacemakers, and seers, old and young, and their intrepid helpers who have come here in the service of humanity at this time of great change. All persons' names have been changed. Chapter 23, The Moon Pyramid. I can never pronounce this. Teotihuacan, Mexico. Teotihuacan is the name of the place. March 16th, 1975. When I was 18 years old, my boyfriend Jeff and I did a road trip from Edmonton, Alberta to Mexico City to deliver cartons of books to a professor friend at one of the universities there. After driving through forests, mountains, fields, and deserts, we arrived at the largest city in the world. 8, 10 lane freeways at high speed, and a thatched burden burro being led by an indigenous, traditionally clad man across the concrete overpass. We were lost, so took a random off-ramp in search of a phone. Our conversational Spanish was rudimentary. We ended up in a mortuary where coffins were on display, and the owners were kind and helpful to lost travelers. A university escort came and guided us to our destination, and we stayed with the professor's 2 secretaries, who shared a large high-rise apartment. Selena was a nightlife person and took us to mariachi night in the square, a piano and cello concert, a comedy review, wow, what a trip not understanding a word, and a small restaurant where a 4-piece band spilled out of the tiny kitchen doorway, including a full-sized harp. They surrounded our communal table and serenaded, so charming. The other hostess, Pam, was Texan, multilingual, and our daytime tour guide. She took us to a huge marketplace where I bought a beautifully hand-embroidered dress. Actually, I bought 2. On the underground, my first time ever. The train suddenly stopped and we were plunged into darkness, no lights. No worries, just the end of a line, apparently. Pam taught us to play canasta. She was getting married soon. March 16th, 1975. A Sunday. Pam navigating. Jeff drove us 3 about 50 miles northeast of Mexico City to Teotihuacan, the ancient city of pyramids, known as the place where man becomes God, or birthplace of the gods. Jeff and Pam set off to climb the Sun Pyramid together. I was sunburnt and feeling upset when I climbed the deserted Moon Pyramid alone. The stone step risers were so high, as if made for giants, it seemed. I stood on the flat apex, and a monarch butterfly circled around and around me. I didn't notice its arrival, it was just there. Then it flew away. The pyramids are laid out along the Avenue of the Dead, and Mariposa, butterflies, are said to be souls of the dead, associated with transformation. Decades later, I read Miguel Ruiz's book, The 4 Agreements, in which he states that thousands of years ago the Toltec, masters and students of art, science, and spiritual knowledge in southern Mexico, came together at Teotihuacan to explore and conserve the spiritual knowledge and practices of the ancient ones at the pyramids along the Avenue of the Dead. Still decades later, I learned that there are other pyramids on Earth, grouped in the same formation as at Ep.10, most notably the pyramids at Giza, Egypt, and their orientation exactly mimics Orion's belt in the constellation of Orion. Also, the three mesas of the Hopi are in this same alignment with Orion's belt, and the third mesa corresponds to the star Mintaka and to that moon pyramid that I climbed. At Teotihuacan, the end pyramid, Quetzalcoatl, corresponds to the star Alnitak, a triple star. The sun pyramid, in the middle, to Alnilam, a supergiant star. And the last and smallest to the moon pyramid, the last star of Orion's belt, Mintaka. Mintaka is a double star and appears smaller and slightly offline to the other two Orion's belt stars in the night sky. At Giza, that same last and smallest star pyramid is called the Pyramid of Menkaura. I have such a strong sense of that clear aqua-colored water's place, like a memory. In my natal chart, Mintaka, in Orion at 23 degrees Gemini, is conjunct my moon, and closest to Aldebaran, the bullseye, one of the four royal stars, the star of Archangel Michael, at 9 degrees Gemini, where my Mercury and Moon south node placement is, all in the 10th house. Next to Alcyon, central star of the Pleiades constellation, at 0 degrees Gemini, at the MC of my chart, is Alcyon. Alcyon is called the hen with chicks, and also in the Huichol tribe's peyote story. The Pleiades is the place of the blue deer, their spirit guide. And next to 9th house Taurus sun, 30 degrees from moon and square to Jupiter in Leo 12th house. As well as the Sabian symbols, which Dane Rudyard introduced, the fixed star degrees can be clues to your starseed origins. It helps to have an accurate birth chart, especially the time of birth. With other hints like breadcrumbs, you can connect the dots. Feel a connection or just know? It wasn't until 2025 that I discovered Julia Balaz, who has pioneered the research and inquiry into galactic astrology, which focuses on the fixed star placements in your natal chart. It is fascinating, widening far out from our Milky Way galaxy, giving a whole new perspective. She has much information to share. For example, the Dalai Lama's sun is exactly conjunct the degree for Sirius, which is so fitting. Mintaka is said to be a water planet with aquatic beings living there. Very peaceful and beautiful. Feels like home. I visited a place on Fiji which resembled Mintaka. Fine white sand and turquoise waters. Perfect pure white shells. Pristine. I had longed to be at such a place, like a feeling of missing that, home. I listened to a podcast, 2024, in which a woman in an NDE went to what sure sounded like Mintaka. Which brings me to the subject of monarch programming. As this woman had, as a child, been subjected to that sort of horrible abuse by her Catholic-affiliated relatives and their associates. If one truly knows, not just believes, that we choose the outline, if not exact script of our lives, then why, oh why, would a person choose that? To experience extreme trauma? Just to give one the opportunity to forgive the unforgivable? Which, when arrived at, is another way of being, a way that knows there's nothing to forgive and no need for forgiveness, and indeed is not even a concept. Innocent of any such nastiness, pure bliss, a state that transcends such earthly dark agendas. She repeated, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. So did I. It was like a portal into higher states of consciousness. Here's the thing. I don't approve of torture, especially of children. Forgiveness is letting go. It is not condoning evil behavior. Native traditions dealt severely with those that harmed children, and there are brave advocates now who work to expose such nefarious programs and seek to protect children from such severe trauma. I wish them Godspeed and divine protection. Chapter 24. Portrait of Grampa. Past lives. When I was a girl, I had a penchant for yellow and white dresses, pale blue and white dresses, and Kelly green tights with tartan. I wanted to discover an unknown color which I just knew existed. One of my favorite activities was drawing. I loved eating with chopsticks. When I was 7, coming home from school, crossing the zebra walkway, I was flooded with joy and elation at the realization that I'm me. I'm glad I'm me. Around that age, I was at my maternal grandparents' home with my mom, visiting. She and my grandma Elke set me up with drawing materials at the round oak dining table, knowing I'd be content and occupied. My Aunt Penny, who was also there, relates what happened. Grandpa Roland was settled in his big easy chair where he always sat, and had as a background a huge oil painting of a country road my grandma had painted. I drew for an hour, intently staring at Grandpa, making his portrait. What I drew was a slender, older Chinese man with a long gray queue, a black skull cap, wearing a plain long-sleeved tunic and loose black pants. A huge contrast to how Grandpa Roland really looked. My Grandpa Roland was a big, tall man, born and raised in the Midwest USA, from Cornish English stock. He immigrated to Canada later. He had kind blue eyes and was gentle. He'd been athletic when he was younger and loved baseball and golf. He loved philosophy and studied the Bible and other farther out subjects. A mystery for all the adults why this 6-year-old or 7-year-old grandchild would draw him so utterly different than his 1962 appearance in form in Edmonton, Alberta. My grandmother saved that drawing, and my aunt brought up that event almost 40 years later in the family newsletter Memories Comments handout she had arranged for the last big family reunion in 2000, which I had been unable to attend. I never saw that handout, and I didn't know Penny had done that until decades later when I did see it and read it. What she didn't relate about that story was what happened 10 years after I drew that portrait. When I was 16, my parents were divorcing and I went to stay with my Aunt Penny and 2 cousins in Vancouver. It was summertime and they were ever so kind to me. They were into Paul Twitchell's Eckankar at the time, The Science of the Soul. One of the practices was out-of-body traveling. Another was seeing auras, and another was past life regression. They introduced me to all of that and guided me through experiencing those things. The first and most vivid past lifetime in regression that I saw was of a Chinese life, and my grandfather in that past life was this Chinese man I drew when I was little. Grandpa Roland was my Chinese grandfather, and I was his 6 to 7-year-old grandson, and I had a little sister who I minded and was proud and happy to babysit and be her big brother, responsible for her safety and happiness. I saw myself and experienced myself as this young Chinese boy, brimming with vitality and sheer joy. I trundled my sister in a wheelbarrow as we were going to haul some cabbages. Our living space was on the sidewalk in a shanty. I think now maybe it was wartime, 1900-ish, and we had been displaced. Were we farmers? And our parents were gone. Our grandfather, now our caretaker, was hard-pressed to provide, and he looked wan. That's all I saw in that experience. I saw a couple of other lifetimes. One as a young African male, another as an older woman living in a wooden house in a seaside town in England. But none impressed me like the first one that I saw. I could ask, what's the deal with that grandfather and me? Here's an interesting fact. He was born in the middle of 5 boys, and I was born in the middle of 5 girls. Such symmetry. I would say our bond was gentleness, a love of the natural world, and a contemplative nature. The Buddhist middle way comes to mind. Another relation I have memory of in other past lives is my daughter Ren. In this life. In one of those lives, we were pubescent girls, white-robed, side by side in a line of rattlesnake initiates. In this rite of passage, one's foot was bitten by the venomous snake. Shamanic initiates, a sisterhood. That was a dream vision in 1992. In 2016 or so, I had another oh-so-clear dream of life. We lived near the shores of 1700s England or France. I was a high-born lady, dressed in a sumptuous deep green velvet gown, my thick auburn hair in a fashionable chignon. My lady's maid was by my right side as we stood on the shale beach and gazed out to sea. My husband was a naval officer on a ship that had recently left, and so it was just me and her. We were close. I treated her like a sister, though she was my servant and dressed for her station. She was my favorite companion in that lonely life. Now she is my daughter and only child in this lifetime. In 2016, another very clear memory also came to me in the sleep dream state. This one was informative about unfinished, now finished, karma. The scene was a stateroom in a ship. I was a male naval officer in white uniform, and I was reprimanding a young female cadet for disobedience. I lost my temper. She was insolent as well as disobedient, and I slapped her face hard. Well, end of that scenario. Just that snippet. Then a female voice firmly told me that was Rob Edwin. That cadet I'd slapped was now a man I'd been lovers with who had taken revenge. Quite the overkill doing so too, I might add. 14 years elapsed before I got this dream news flash, and I had long since let go of it. Buried the hatchet, the buck stops here kind of thing. The power of forgiveness and love. I've had other dreams that sure do feel like past scenarios. A long and detailed one is with a Native American tribe. I felt I belonged and was treated with honor. When I was 14 or so, I read Initiation by Elizabeth H. H-A-I-C-H. A fascinating read about her past life recall of ancient Egypt. Her friend and co-worker on the book was, another name, Selvarajan Yasidian, who wrote Yoga and Health, a book I found in my mother's extensive library when I was much younger, and I used to pore over that book for hours. I was especially riveted by his Hatha Yoga poses. Somehow his popping up in this other context did not surprise me at all. I think that'll be it for this time around. And so that concludes episode 10. Signing off.